Morning again, coffee chat friend. Just wanted to talk a little bit today about the importance of clear communication. This I think is so important because if communicating even within ourselves helps us to clarify whatever it is that we're doing, whatever it is that we want to do, whatever it is we want to think about, and doing the same with others is important to our quality of life, and I think it is, then, even though we have talked about communication before, I think it's worth touching on it again. And what I wanted to touch on today was something that has come up a couple of times over the last while, this concept of the logical fallacy. The logical fallacy, of course, is like an error in logic. Logic being the way we construct things together. There's an old system of critical thinking called the trivium, which goes back to antiquity, basically, where there was three key components to this trivium of the grammar, the logic, and the rhetoric. Of course, the grammar is kind of like the raw material of the words and how we structure in which we put them together. And so we can use that input, if you will, to then use our logic, apply our logic to it, and then come out with an organized grammar structure with an argument, essentially, like a proposition that has been run through a logical system. To understand this better for myself, anyways, I like to use the analogy of a computer, and how this relates to a computer is input, process, and output. If we can imagine that we have a computer and we're putting in data, but the processor is faulty, well then automatically we would say, or it would make sense, that our output is going to be fallacious. It's not going to be correct, right? I mean, you can imagine if you had even a simple computer like a small calculator, if you type 1 plus 1 into it and the equal sign, if there's something wrong with the processing unit, it might give you just gibberish, or might say 3 or 4, or a whole line of 3s or 4s, because it's not able to process it, and therefore the output is an error. Now, these logical fallacies are, in a way, they're important for us to realize that we get ourselves involved with them, about creating process errors in our logical construct within ourselves and in communication with others. And to help ourselves with this, we can actually have fun with it within ourselves and be observant of how we come to conclusions, and to listen to others and how they come to conclusions. And if we have an agreement with somebody to work on this together, it's kind of fun in a way, because we can catch each other meddling around with these fallacies and not bothering with the rigor of going right through a process system and coming to like a universal conclusion. Basically, you can look them up. There's lots of them. There's sort of standardized terms that people come up with to do with these logical fallacies, and they have to do mostly with assertions. We're asserting something to be true in relation to or that it actually matters in a conversation. And an example would be if you and I are having a discussion, and the discussion is whether something is valid or not. Let's say whether politics as we know it is valid or not. And I tend to be losing my ground. I don't seem to have as much strength or validity. And if I then eventually turn around and say, oh, well, you're just angry about politics. Well, that is kind of like, it's kind of like a fallacy that's known as an ad hominem, which is a kind of an attack on the giver of a message. It's like shooting the messenger instead of actually looking at the message. See, it doesn't matter whether somebody is angry about politics or is not angry about politics. Either an argument is true or it's or it's false to a great degree, right? It's like saying, if you were to tell me that 1 plus 3 is equal to 4, and I didn't understand that in some way, and you were trying to tell me, and eventually I just turned around and said, well, you're just saying that because you're upset at me, or something like this. Well, we can clearly see in a very simple example like that, that is a fallacy that I'm putting into in an attempt to knock you back. It's an attempt to knock the other person off, but what it results in is, if we go along that line, we end up with an error in our logic, because whether somebody is angry or happy, it makes no difference as to the results of 1 plus 3. You see, it makes no difference. So therefore, it is a fallacy. Why is this important? Well, I would say it's important, once again, for our quality of life experience. The cleaner and more clear we can get in our communication with ourselves and with others, the better we can direct our lives. And the more we can direct our lives, surely the better quality of life we can at least conceptually have. Therefore, I would say that becoming aware of our tendency to fall into logical fallacies, to use logical fallacies, and the tendency of others to use logical fallacies, by becoming aware of that alone, can help us to pick them out and help us to follow a more logical process system at arriving at our conclusions, rather than, say, jumping to judgments and conclusion based on fallacies and ending up with errors in our logic, and therefore errors in our conclusions. My comments for this morning. If you have any comments as to what you think about that, please let me know. You can comment below if you want. It's been great chatting again, and hope to do this again soon. Bye-bye.